ratios between those fundamental forces, people have figured out, oh, if this ratio was different by some factor, like a factor of 2 or something, I was like, oh, this would all like not work. And you look at the sun, right? It's like, so it turns out that there are key reactions that if they had slightly lower probability, no star would ever ignite. And then life wouldn't be possible.
It does seem like the universe set things up for us that it's possible to do some cool things, but it's challenging. So that keeps it fun for us.
Yeah, that's the way I look at it. I mean, the multiverse model is an interesting one because there are quantum scientists who look at and figure. It's like, oh yeah, like quantum science perhaps tells us that there are almost an infinite variety of other universes. But the way that it works probably is it's almost like a form of natural selection. It's like, well, the universes that didn't have the correct or interesting relationships between these forces, nothing happens in them. So almost by definition, the fact that we're having this conversation means that we're in one of the interesting ones by default.
Yeah, one of the somewhat interesting, but there's probably super interesting ones where I tend to think of humans as incredible creatures. Our brain is an incredible computing device, but I think we're also extremely cognitively limited. I can imagine alien civilizations that are much, 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 much more intelligent in ways we can't even comprehend in terms of their ability to construct models of the world, to do physics and mathematics.
I would see it in a slightly different way. It's because we have creatures that live with us on the earth that have cognition, right? That understand and move through their environment, but they actually see things in a way, or they sense things in a way which is so fundamentally different. It's really hard. Like it's the problem is the translation, not necessarily intelligence. So it's the perception of the world. So I have a dog. And when I go out and I see my dog like smelling things, there's a realization that I have that he sees or senses the world in a way that I can never, like I can't understand it because I can't translate my way to this. We get little glimpses of this as humans though, by the way, because there are some parts of it, for example, optical information, which comes from light, is that now because we've developed the technology, we can actually see things. I get this, as one of my areas of research is spectroscopy. So this means the study of light, and I get to quote unquote see things or representations of them from, the far infrared all the way to like hard X-rays, which is several orders of magnitude of the light intensity. But our own human eyes like see a teeny little sliver of this.
Yeah.
So that even like bees, for example, see a different place than we do. So I think if you think of, there's already other intelligences like around us in a limited way, because of the way they can communicate. But it's like those are already baffling in many ways. Yeah.
So if we just focus in on the senses, there's already a lot of diversity, but there's probably things we're not even considering as possibilities. Yes. For example, whatever the heck consciousness is, could actually be a door into understanding some physical phenomena haven't even begun understanding. So just like you said, spectroscopy, there could be a similar kind of spectrum for consciousness that we're like these dumb descendants of apes, like walking around. It sure feels like something to experience the color red, but like we don't have. It's the same as in the ancient times. You experience physics, you experience light. Yeah. It's like, oh, it's bright, and
yeah.
And you construct kind of semi-religious
well, it's interesting. We might actually experience this faster than we thought because we might be building another kind of intelligence.
Yeah, and that intelligence will explain to us how silly we are.
There was an email thread going around the professors in my department already of so what is it going to look like to figure out if students have actually written their term papers or it's
ChatGPT.
ChatGPT. It was so as usual we tend to be empiricists in my field. So of course they were in there like trying to figure out if it could answer like questions for a qualifying exam to get into the PhD program at MIT, which was they didn't do that well at that point. But of course this is just the beginning of it. So we have some interesting ones to go.
Eventually, both the students and the professors will be replaced by ChatGPT.
Yeah,
and we'll sit on the beach.
I really recommend, this. I don't know if you've ever seen them. It's called "The Day the Universe Changed." This is
that a movie?
James Burke.
Yeah.
He's a science historian based in the UK. He had a fairly famous series on public television called Connections, I think it was. But the one that I really enjoyed was The Day the Universe Changed, and the reason for the title of it was that um, he says the universe is what we know and perceive of it. So when there's a fundamental insight as to something new, the universe for us changes. Of course, the universe from an objective point of view is the same as it was before, but for us, it has changed. So he walks through these moments of perception in the history of humanity that like changed what we were, right? And so as I was thinking about coming to discuss this, people see fusion, oh, it's still far away, or it's been slow progress. It's like when my godmother was born, like people had no idea how stars worked. So
Yeah.
you talk about like that day, that insight,
Yeah.
the universe changed. It's like, oh, this is and they still didn't understand all the parts of it, but they basically got it. It's like, oh, because of the understanding of these processes, it's like we unveiled the reason that there can be life in the universe. That's probably one of those days the universe changed, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
And that was around the 1930s. Yeah.
it seems like technology is developing faster and faster and faster.
Yeah.
I tend to think, just like with ChatGPT, I think this year might be extremely interesting, just with how rapid
Mm-hmm.
and how profitable the efforts in artificial intelligence are, that just stuff will happen where our whole world is transformed like this, and there's a shock, and then next day you kind of go on and you adjust immediately. You probably won't have a similar kind of thing with nuclear fusion with energy, because there's probably going to be an opening ceremony and stuff.
Yes.
An announcement. It'll take months, but with digital technology, you can just have a immediate transformation of society, and then it'll be this gasp, and then you kind of adjust like
Yeah.
we always do, and then you don't even remember, just like with the internet and so on,
Yeah.
how the days were before.
And how it worked before, right? Yeah. I mean, fusion will be, because it's energy. Its nature is that it will be, and anything that has to do with energy use tends to be a slower transition. But they're the most, I would argue, some of the most profound
Yes.
transitions that we make. I mean, the reason that we can live like this and sit in this building and have this podcast and people around the world is at its heart is energy use,
Mhm.
and it's intense energy use that came from the evolution of starting to use intense energies at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution up to now. It's a bedrock actually of all of these, but it doesn't tend to come overnight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some of the most important, some of the most amazing technology is one we don't notice because we take it for granted, because it enables this whole thing.